Okay, welcome back everybody. Done some leveling up in the off time. We're gonna head to Fedora Castle.
I hear you've learned the whereabouts of the princess?
She was spotted with a party of Dark Knights training at Barnisha Castle.
Abuna Maruva, is the king's tomb located at Barnisha?
I do not know. I had already left the city when the king passed. Yet I find their actions baffling.
How so?
I heard no claims that the king had been buried anywhere but the royal mausoleum. I am sure that the queen and prince rest there in the city.
So they searched for a different tomb?
Indeed.
When we reach Barnisha, we'll know.
True enough. I doubt Branton expects us to move on them there. And we should have the support of the people if we're seen as wresting the princess from the hands of the Dark Knights.
I am inclined to agree.
We prepare for war then.
Hooray!
Send one legion to Urumza Canyon to draw the Bakram forces' attention. While they are so occupied, I will lead a detachment directly on Barnisha.
As you command, sir.
We're creating a feint so that the main force will attack directly.
Let us pray the chariot rides with us.
Indeed. Basically saying, I hope luck's on our side. I don't know what's new, it's in stock. I'm gonna have to take a look. I've taken a look. There was nothing of any value in that has been restocked as far as I could tell. Alright, now we are going to use a full party of 12 members to slaughter these people as we head our way to the castle. The first battle is over this bridge that apparently doesn't have any water under it.
This is our land. If I fall this day defending it, I leave no regrets.
A strange thing. Like a little tiny creek there, but it looks like at one point a large river ran through here. Or I guess it could handle a lot more water than it currently does. There's currently only whatever you want to call those arches. Only one of the arches is letting water through, but there's up to 9 of them, with 3 on the far left and 3 on the far right. Not wholly sure that makes a lot of sense, but I'm not an whatever engineer that would be. I guess a civil engineer. What a strange job to have. I mean, it's not strange as in, like, I think it's weird. I mean, you need to have people that are able to, you know, build, you know, grade land and that sort of stuff. But, like, when I think of engineering, I think a lot of more along the lines of the mechanical, electrical side of things. Where either you are creating some sort of, I don't want to say robotic, but mechanical item, you know, that's run by, you know, an engine and gears and whatever else. Or you're on the electrical side where you are the one helping to manage the power that goes through like a controlling board, or I guess to a lesser degree, maybe like a motor or something, I don't know. The civil engineer, on the other hand, would deal, if I remember correctly, it would be mainly with like roads and rivers and that sort of stuff, which seems kind of odd in comparison to the other professions. Seem to be more in line with like, oh, this is very apt for businesses, you know, creating things, making stuff from scratch, or using design elements from a previous design to improve upon the process, you know? Yeah. Planning, designing, constructing infrastructure like roads, bridges, and water systems to improve society. I will help you out with that a little bit. I understand. I don't understand, like, controlling waterways. Because water does a pretty good job of controlling itself. But I do know that if you take a stream, you watch a stream, it tends to snake a lot, you know, where it'll go down and it'll go left and right, and it'll like I said, it'll snake, you know, where it does like an S thing. And sometimes it'll double back on itself only to continue downstream, as you would call it. And I can't remember, it was someone, I heard about this, that happened over in Europe. I thought it would be a smart idea to take some of the streams and straighten them out. You know, to whatever you want to call it, optimize the water flow so it, you know, flows through the city. But the way the nature naturally creates the snaking path, it allows the water that's coming off the land to properly drain into the creek or riverbed in a way that, you know, the land will essentially create the streams and tributaries that it needs for that level of water coming off the land. So, you know, you can do this if you've got like say you don't have let's say you have a lawn, or you don't have a lawn, okay, and you strip off, you know, the grass, you know, so it's just mud, okay, and then you wait for let's say a relatively heavy rainfall. Doesn't have to be a super heavy like downpour rainfall, but you wait for a somewhat heavy rainfall and you let it go over a couple hours, and you come back and look at it. You'll see that in the mud itself, it creates little, you know, the water starts to flow and it creates little channels. And then those big channels start to form, you know, those little channels start to form into a bigger one. And that's how the water sort of moves off the land. And you'll probably see, you know, a bunch of tiny ones coming into larger ones, but they won't all necessarily filter into one area, you know. But over time, if you were to leave it alone, it would. You know, they would essentially find the water would continue to run, and nature would naturally create that runoff, you know. Because they tried straightening, I'm told they're trying to straighten out some rivers over in Europe, streams, what have you, and it ended up causing more flooding because of it. Because the water was traveling downstream faster than it should have, was overflowing the banks of the river, whereas if you had left the winding, meandering creek as it was, you know, all of that water that was coming off the land would have been, it would have had a longer distance to travel, if you get what I mean. And so in doing so, this amount of water would take, say, you know, this gallon of water would take a couple of minutes to reach the city or the town, but now it's getting there in 10 seconds or 30 seconds. So it's met by other waters that are also moving faster, just causing the creek bed to rise faster than it would if you had left nature to itself. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, well, engineers just make everything worse, civil engineers are worthless, they're useless. Because they do come up with some good ideas. I'm not a real big fan of roundabouts myself. I understand people over in Europe love them. But if you're going to give me a roundabout, you know, try to make it make sense for me, okay? I.e., I'm on a road, I come to a roundabout, okay? Roundabout should get me to any other place that I need to go, whether it is left, right, straight, you know, double backing on yourself in some way. You know, practically doing a U-turn if you want. You know, via the roundabout, that is. But there should never be a roundabout next to a roundabout. Okay. And I speak of something that actually exists, and I don't actually have to drive on it, but I've driven on it in the past. It's a roundabout next to a roundabout. And originally it was a four-way intersection, and the intersection wasn't like a traditional T. It was kind of like, imagine you've got one road heading from left to right, and then the adjacent road, the one that's going to connect to it, is at a, say, a 45 degree angle, or possibly even worse than that, like a 30 degree angle, which made it difficult because if you're trying to turn left, that turn was kind of ridiculous, and then the right hand turn was a little too easy. That if you weren't paying attention, you'd blow the stop sign and just go right through into that intersection, which could cause an issue. It wasn't like a big one that needed a traffic light or anything, but just sort of the way the traffic flow went. Then, you know, you think that putting a roundabout there would make sense. It would. You know, you would leave the roads basically the same. You'd give the people the ability to turn left, stay right, and you're keeping the traffic flow moving without putting in unnecessary stop signs. You know, obviously you yield to the people that are in the roundabout, and then you make your way in. But for some reason, they decided to put a roundabout there that's, you know, going into that section, and then a second roundabout right after it. So, you know, if you were traveling from left to right, you would go, you know, to the right, go around half the roundabout, then hit on the second roundabout, go around the half second of the roundabout, and then go straight. Okay, so you've just kind of gone a longer direction. However, if you're trying to go straight on the diagonal path, you know, now you gotta go around part of the roundabout, then you hit the second roundabout, you go, you know, from, I don't know, let's say you're going from 8 to, say, 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock on the first one, and then from 4 to, say, 12 or 1 o'clock on the other side. But the real confusion for me was if you're going from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, you know, you stay on the first roundabout, I guess. So you can go 7 to 9, you know, you can go 7, you go around the roundabout to 9, so you can double back to do essentially a left-hand turn. I think the only reason why they did that second roundabout was because if you're coming the opposite direction on the road that travels from, in this case, right to left, straight, you want to go up onto that other road, what you have to do is you would have to hit the roundabout, but you would hit it in such a way that you would be going from 3 o'clock to 1 o'clock. So by the time you're on the roundabout, you off the roundabout, you know. But even that doesn't make sense to me, why you would have to have a second one because of that. But some civil engineer figured that was the best way to handle that thing. That's me criticizing them. Now, on the other hand, there's someone somewhere at some university, or maybe it was just some, you know, normal person, we'll say, person who may have only graduated from high school or not at all, came up with what they call the diverging diamond, which I think is one of the most brilliant things that has come out of, like, traffic. in a while. And on the way the diverging diamond works, seems like it doesn't make any sense, but it makes perfect sense when you go. It essentially eliminates the clover leaf, if you know what a clover leaf is. So in order for you, if you're trying to, you know, you're on a highway going north to south, and there's another road going east to west. Okay. And the traditional clover leaf, what you would do is if you were going, if you're headed northbound and you want to go to the east, you would get off at the first exit. Okay. And that's pretty normal. Nothing really too drastic about that. Just getting off, you're bearing to the right hand side, and you travel down that way. Okay. But if you want to travel west, you have to get off the second exit, and you make this very long round turn that basically goes what? I don't know. What would that be? 720 degrees, I think. You'd be going, and this wasn't good for trucks, because if the trucks were going too fast going around the clover leaf, they could tip over. Garbage trucks as well. Anything that's higher and heavier can tip over because of the centrifugal force you're trying to make. So typically, you know, they would post, you know, oh, if you're coming off the road and you're getting onto a roundabout, or not a roundabout, on one of these cloverleaf offshoots, you should reduce your speed from whatever the highway is, we'll say 55, 65, down to 35 or 25 or 15, you know. And even if you were in a car, a low car like mine, you get off one of these clover leaves, you're going too fast getting off the highway, when you could, you know, spin your wheels a little bit, you know, like drift a little bit. So you definitely have to slow down. And then the same thing can be said for if you're trying to go, you're trying to go the opposite direction. You got to go on the other side of the clover leaf, you know, because there's 4, north, south, east, west. Each has creates a clover leaf, depending on what opposite 720 direction you're trying to go. So the diverging diamond creates this situation where you keep all of the most simple turns to get on and off the highway, and you eliminate the clover leaf entirely. So if you get off at the first exit, so in a diverging diamond, if you're trying to go east or west, getting off going north, you're going to get off at the same exit. There's not a second exit to go east and a different exit to go west. It's the same exit. And where the diverging diamond works is you come to that intersection, and if you want to go east, you just stay on that side of the diverging diamond, and you proceed on like you would in a normal clover leaf. Okay? But where the brilliance in the diverging diamond is, if you want to go, west after getting off north, you get in the other lane, and instead of having to cross over a set of traffic, you're going to go with the traffic. Now, you know, in the United States, we drive on the right, you know, and then the opposite lane, you know, the opposite lane obviously is going the opposite direction. So driving on the right. But the divergent diamond puts you on the left of the road. So you're essentially in the left area where you would normally not be driving because you would be driving against traffic, but that's the way traffic flows. And then you come back into the right lane after you meet up with the other diverging diamond, which again is the opposite side where the southbound lanes are getting off and they're trying to travel west. And you guys merge together at this second diverging diamond. And depending on how busy that diverging diamond is, you can add traffic lights there. So basically, when, say, the people that are going from east to west that aren't getting on the highway, they're headed east, they hit the divergent diamond, their light turns green, and the light up on the other side of the Virgin Diamond's also green. So all of this is flowing, you see. So if you imagine, you know, you're cutting across to the quote-unquote wrong side of the road, but you're following traffic, and then you're coming back to the right side of the road, all of that continues to flow. And then both of those lights turn red, and the opposite turns green. So now, all of a sudden, the right-hand lane comes over to the left. Again, there's no conflict because you have traffic lights there, and then that allows that area to flow. And at no point do you create a what is that called? A gridlock, because the second light in this two-light pattern stops later. Okay? So, first light starts, the first group of people start heading either east or west. Then, as you start to approach the traffic that's at a stoplight, that light turns green. And so they're already moving before you get to the tail end of that line. And then you continue on, and then the first light turns red. And these people are still, you know, emptying out of this area, which they have their own lanes, obviously. It's not like the diverging diamond, you're sharing 2 lanes, and you got to make sure this is always open. But this helps to keep the traffic flow moving, so that you don't have backup created at one traffic light of the dividing diamond, and then you create gridlock so that no one can cross over the actual diamond, you know, the connecting diamond. When they proposed it originally, I thought it was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard. And having driven over it hundreds of times now, I think it is the most brilliant thing that's come out of traffic philosophy in forever. You know, obviously I've seen them redo exits, you know, add exits, subtract exits, get rid of bridges, add bridges, try to make stuff work based on population and how many people are using these highways and byways, and, you know, create, you know, breaking up a full intersection, a full, you know, conjunction like the Cloverleaf, and creating it so that if you want to go this direction, you can only get off here. If you want to go the other way to get into town, you'll have to go to the next exit. Eliminating the diamond and the Cloverleaf entirely. But I've seen a lot of very bad, very poorly thought out design in both directions, where you've over-engineered it and you're thinking that 100,000 cars are going to go through this intersection every day, and only, you know, say 1/10 of that goes through. You've got all of this capacity set up for the, you know, the intersection when it's not needed. And then I've seen, which is, with this second one's even worse, where you think that there's only going to be a few hundred people passing through this intersection, and you've got thousands of people passing through this intersection every day, causing traffic jams and backups, particularly at rush hour type times. And there's never really, once you start talking about traffic, there's never a good answer, because at that point you've created a situation where it's going to require years of investigation, you know, and planning before they actually introduce anything, and everything's going to be super expensive, and it's going to be a fight uphill to get the tax money for it, because I don't know, we don't know how to do taxes, I guess. We're either so worried about our tax money going to places we don't want it to go, so we basically say no one should pay taxes ever, or legitimately our money's going to stupid places where it doesn't belong. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, we think that we're gonna cut the pork. We're gonna cut the pork out. We're just gonna get rid of all these slush funds. They're all gonna go away. When in reality, what ends up happening is we just end up cutting meat away from the bone, and the slush funds and the fat still exist in the budget every year. You know, that's the stuff that never goes away. You know, your public television won't get funding anymore, you know, because we don't like them anymore. We think that's a waste of money, you know, but it helps, you know, it helps people who, I don't know. You know, you don't have to watch as many advertisements on public television because everything's publicly funded, either by people like you and me or the government in some capacity. But I don't know. We're sort of at that point where we get butthurt over everything, and we care more about ratings on television regarding our news than actually getting unbiased news and letting you make your own fucking decisions based on the information provided to you by the news. Why? Because it's big money. You could put a completely non-biased television news program together, evening news every night, but you'd be competing against, first of all, the local channels that are long established. And you would be not doing nearly as well as your cable competitors that poach or that preach a particular political slant. Why? Because people agree with them and they watch just so they can get their opinion reinforced. It's annoying. It's disgusting. It makes for, because it then just creates a, you know, me versus you sort of thing, and nobody ends up winning. It's just me yelling at you, and you know, the government ultimately doesn't change anything because, you know, whoever wins, they're the devil. But they're the one running our country. I mean, but they're the devil. And, you know, whenever your guy's in, then, no, I mean, he can't do anything wrong.
Let them cross the Urumza. I must be defended.
That's nice. Anywho, that's the end of this battle. We're going to cut the episode in just a second. And when we come back, we're going to be doing another battle to get us closer to the next castle where our sister is. So until then, I hope you have a good one.